I don't know.
You have to know how to spell it, it's going green.
I just said she's a lovely person.
Okay, let's
As long as
start,
she
please.
Doesn't hurt me.
You know, Nancy did really good with it.
Yeah. You never know.
With Dr.
All right,
Hachi.
I am starting my talk at Triangle Square. My name is Sable Boroff. And what I'm going to talk about today is a big part of human history was the early caveman and the giant beasts that they had to deal with, many of whom were extinct, and many of whom went extinct about 10 or 11,000 years ago, because there was a great deal of climate change then, like we're having now, and all of the grasslands and forests changed. A lot of the giant plant-eating animals died out because the plants all changed, and then the big carnivores died because their prey died. That was a big reason, part of their extinction. A lot of these animals went extinct all at the same time, and then part of it was due to human hunting as well. So the first thing I want to talk about is the mammoths, which we all know, the big giant elephants that were all hairy. There were Columbian mammoths from Canada to Mexico. They were 14 feet tall. They weighed anywhere from 5 to 11 tons. Their tusks were 12 inches long. They were bigger than the woolly mammoths. And they lived in the Americas. There was also ground sloths, who were huge. They were in South America up to 8,000 years ago. They were big as an elephant, 20 feet long, 4 tons.
Wow.
They had very sharp teeth and claws, and they may have eaten meat too. And they were, and early man ate
What's going on
them.
back here? What is that? What is that?
Neil, Neil.
Stop.
And also,
Stop.
there was a giant ape, which really died out 100,000 years ago, but I wanted to mention it because they always say it might be Sasquatch. It was 10 feet tall, 1,000 pounds, Southeast
God.
Asia in the climate, but probably it didn't survive in the jungles of America all that time, because it really died out about 100,000 years ago, or before early man would have gotten a hold of it. And there was also a cave hyena, which weighed about 285 pounds, which was a vicious animal. It traveled in packs, and it can kill an elephant. And early man inhabited the same caves as the cave hyena, and they were probably in packs of 30. And they all of these animals went extinct all at the same time. There was a very famous saber-toothed tiger, which was as big as an African lion, and it had those huge teeth. And there are a great many of them in the La Brea tar pits. They were apparently not too bright, and they kept getting into the tar. And also the dire wolf, which was 5 feet long, 200 pounds. It was in the Americas, and it was stronger than a regular gray wolf, but about the same size. The American
Hey,
lion.
let's have some respect, guys.
Hey,
Hello.
please,
Quiet.
please.
Respect, please. Respect.
The American lion, which was in America too, it was the biggest wildcat ever. It weighed 780 pounds, and it was all over the Americas as well. There was also in Australia a giant lizard, which was 23 feet long, and it weighed, well, I need to look up the weight. It was in Australia, and it was poisoned, and it ate meat. And that was there right around the same time as,
Why don't you
at
give
the
him a minute
same
till he finishes
time-
with his crap? Hold on, Sable, until he finishes with his, whatever the hell he's doing there.
it was there at the same time as the humans in Australia. And anyway, it was a very dangerous animal. The Komodo dragon, which is a relative of his, is a very dangerous lizard, and it's way smaller. It's about 8 feet long. There was also the short-faced bear, which inhabited a lot of the same caves that people did, or tried to. When it stood up, it was like 14 feet tall.
Oh my God. Can you
And
imagine?
it was very big, and it had big claws. And let me look up the short-faced bear.
Face.
Yeah, there's several bears. So the short-faced bear, it had a big,
little-
you know, strong muzzle, and it was very vicious. And I have a lot of pictures, which I'll show you afterwards, comparing them in size to people. And the short-faced, I'm trying to look up the short-faced bear. And there was even, yeah, the teeth of a saber-toothed tiger were 11 inches long.
Oh my God.
And actually, the cave lion hunted bears. When they were hibernating, the cave lion would go in there and kill them, apparently. It didn't really live in the caves. And anyway, the short-faced bear, I think, weighed about 1,000 pounds. There was also, in Australia, a crocodile that was 23 feet long.
My God.
It's bigger than the biggest crocodile ever. It lived on land and it could run really fast. So you wouldn't want to encounter any of these animals being a little person. The short-faced bear was 2,000 pounds. It could run like a cheetah, and it would run on its hind legs. So 14 feet tall, running. I mean, it's way bigger. A male grizzly, which is the biggest bear almost today, is 600 pounds. This is 2,000 pounds. And the short-faced bear was from Alaska to Mississippi, and it could run 40 miles an hour. And there was also a bird in South America which went extinct almost the same time people got there, which was called a terror bird, and I have a photo of it. It was 10 feet tall. It was a flightless bird, and it had huge, vicious clawed feet, which it would, use to attack its prey. And it had a huge beak, and it would stab you with the beak and attack you with its claws. And it was called a terror bird, and it was mostly in South America. And the giant ground sloth, which weighed 1,000 pounds, was very slow moving, and there's a lot of evidence people ate that. And it was 12 feet high on its hind legs, and up to 4.5 tons, so 12 feet long. Today, sloths weigh about 20 pounds, and this may have been carnivorous too, the ancient one. And and there was also, so what it was like, 10, 20, 30,000 years ago, there was no civilization. People lived in small groups of 20 or 30, not very large, and they hunted with spears, and they had to deal with these gigantic animals, and they shared a lot of the same caves people wanted, and it must have been really terrifying. And I think that's one of the reasons that human beings today have so much aggression, which we direct mainly toward each other at the moment. But our history and our brains were developed to deal with all nature, which was very violent and vicious, all these animals. So that's where we get our aggression from. And evolution takes millions of years. 10,000 years is a minute in evolution, or even a second. So our brains are all adapted to all this violent animals and trying to defend ourselves. And we're also adapted to living in very small groups of 20 to 30 people. That's most of our human history. We lived in very small groups, like 20 to 30 people, and spread far apart. So when you get all the crowding that we have today in cities and civilization, that makes aggression worse too, which any animal that's crowded, that's a mammal, gets more aggressive. So that's one explanation for all the violence in the world today. It's not really, there's no good answer to it, but at least it's an explanation. So there was also a giant armadillo that was the size of a VW Beetle.
Oh my God.
And there were
so
giant beavers that were 8 feet long and 200 pounds. And there was a woolly rhinoceros, which was huge in Europe, which is extinct. And it went all the way to Siberia. A lot of the mammoths and the woolly rhinoceros went all the way into the cold climates. They had extra hair to deal with it. They use their tusks to dig in the snow to eat the tundra underneath. And there were also wild boars. They were larger than the rhino today. I mean, this is how big these pigs were. And even today, hunters that are hunting wild boars today, which are only 200 pounds today, they're more hunters say that they're more dangerous than bears. Today's wild boars, and these were way bigger, they had sharp tusks which were razor sharp. Wild pigs are extremely aggressive, especially if you get a mother with piglets. I mean, there's nothing madder than a mother when her children are being threatened. And also, it's the fourth most intelligent animal in the world, a pig. And they have a lot of aggression, and there was one killed in 2004 that was 12 feet long and weighed 1,000 pounds. That's today.
Oh my God.
So these ancient ones, and they also travel in herds. So there's not just one you have to deal with; it's a whole bunch of them. And they've also, a lot of these animals were in cave paintings when they did those wonderful cave paintings. They painted wild hyenas, wild cows, which are called aurochs, and I'll talk about them in a minute. The wild pigs were in the cave paintings. And actually, the wild pigs, they eventually domesticated, and it became the modern pig. Just so you know, right now in China, because there's a pork shortage, they're breeding giant pigs in China now, but without the aggression, that weigh up to 1,000 pounds.
Oh, nice.
Because there's a pork shortage, and they're trying to make sure they have enough food for their people. But the also one thing, yeah, and the La Brea tar pits have a lot of these skeletons in there. They're very famous, especially, of course, everybody knows the saber-toothed tiger. The cave lion was not as often in La Brea tar pits. They think they probably were too smart to get caught there, but the saber-tooths weren't that bright, and they ended up falling into the tar all the time. The dire wolf, which is also on the Game of Thrones, if anybody's a fan of that show, is one of the animals, magical animals on the Game of Thrones TV show. And the dire wolf is the largest ancient canine that ever lived. And it was 200 pounds and 5 feet long. And it had a stronger bite even than today's wolf. It had very powerful jaws. And they traveled in packs, and early man had to deal with them too. Another animal that's very interesting is the auroch. Now the auroch, which is, I have a photo of there, is a giant cow. And it's the ancestor of our modern cow. But these were very large. They lived until 1627 in Poland, in the forests in Poland, but they were 6 feet high and weighed a ton. And early man ended up domesticating these things, and you can imagine how much risk and danger that was. And they've been in a lot of the cave paintings. Julius Caesar wrote about the giant cow, and I want to see what he said. He said their strength and speed was extraordinary. They were vicious with man and wild beast, and a little below an elephant in size. So they were huge too, and I have a photo of them compared to a human. These aren't actual photos, but they're from the internet. So we eventually, and they had huge horns, and they were way more. One thing, when humanity domesticated animals, they did it with dogs, cats, cows, pigs, sheep, and ducks. They selected them over the millennium to be less aggressive, so that they could herd them and control them better. So our modern animals are way less aggressive than the wild versions of them all, including dogs too, except for some dogs. And actually, in Europe, they're trying to bring back the aurochs because they're trying to breed, I'm not exactly understanding how they're gonna do this, but they're trying to breed back cows to their ancestors of the aurochs and and they're trying to release them in the forest, so to control to do environmental, so they graze and leave the land open for other vegetation. But they may be sorry they did that if they do
Exactly.
succeed,
Yeah, it
because they're
doesn't
very
sound- I
aggressive.
agree. I
You know,
agree.
we ought to
Saw
know
it
from
on
science
TV.
fiction movies how this all turns out, but we never learn humanity. We got to do it anyway. So, and
Darwin thing.
and then there was also the cave hyena, which was a very large animal. It weighed about 280 pounds. And they were also in packs. And they had a bite that could crush bone. And they were way more bigger than modern day hyenas. And huge animals, way bigger than modern day hyenas, and they're mostly, modern day hyenas are mostly scavengers, but these guys used to hunt mammoths and very big animals. And again, they lived in the same caves people did. And there was also a camel in the United States which became extinct. It was 10 feet high at the shoulder, 200 pounds. It looked a lot like a giraffe. There was also something that really looked like a camel in the U.S., which was 7 feet tall and 1,000 pounds. That was with humans in the U.S., and they all went extinct about 10,000 years ago because the climate changed and their vegetation, their vegetation disappeared, and then the predators couldn't have any food because they needed a lot of food. These big animals, they needed large prey. And also humans were hunting their prey also. So that was a factor in this extinction, was humanity. It wasn't probably the primary reason because there weren't enough people to really impact it that much, but it was a factor. And also what you might be interested in too is there were in Siberia, we had evidence there. We all know pretty much, this is just about early humans. We all know about Neanderthals pretty much, I mean, somewhat. But there were also other varieties of early humans which lived at the same time as Neanderthals and modern man. Modern man is anywhere between 200,000 and 300,000 years old. There's always new research. But our brains are adapted 200,000 years. That's a long time, and we're adapted for the jungle. But in Siberia, there's evidence that the Neanderthals and the Denisovians, I'm probably not pronouncing it correctly, they lived at the same time in Europe. And then modern man got to Europe about 40,000 years ago. We came out of Africa about 80,000 years ago, and it took us to 40,000 years ago to get to Europe when we met the Neanderthals and the Denisovians, and we all interbred. There's very few skeletons of Neanderthals or Denisovians, very few. So we don't really, it's hard to tell that much about them. But there's one skeleton they found that was a hybrid of a Neanderthal and a Denisovian, so they mated with each other. They say they've done genetic studies on current human beings, and they say that most human beings on the planet have 2% Neanderthal DNA, so they got in there somewhere. So anyway, that's about it. I have some very lovely photos here, which I'll pass around. And I'm going to stop